Hi and welcome to TESOL with Micky and Ida. I'm Micky and today I want to talk to you about Lev Vygotsky. We're actually starting a short series about Lev Vygotsky and this is the first episode, and we're going to go through his theory step by step and think about how we can apply it to the TESOL classroom. Now, Lev Vygotsky is one of the most important thinkers in education, so no matter what you're teaching or what you're doing, you need to listen to this video. Much of his work has become known as sociocultural theory. It means that learning is not just inside in the head, actually it's outside. It's about interactions with other people within a culture. So in this episode, I'm going to go through some of Vygotsky's key ideas, and your job is to, with everything you watch, to think critically and to think, how does this apply to my practice? How does it compare to my experiences of learning and teaching? Okay, so let's start with a quick note. Because Vygotsky was around like 100 years ago and his work has been built upon and developed so much, some of the terms which are associated with him are not always original terms that he coined or that he used. So even in this video, we're talking about pedagogy. Now, although Vygotsky himself was clearly concerned with education, much of the international attention to the pedagogical side of his work came a lot later. And this was after his work was translated from Russian and was taken up by Western scholars. So what we now call sociocultural theory is partly Vygotsky's own work and is partly the work of other researchers that came later and interpreted and developed a lot of his theory. Okay, so the first key idea that we're going to look at is mediation. So what was mediation? So mediation is the suggestion that humans don't learn or think alone. Actually, we use cultural tools to help us do it. So these tools could be physical, they could be mental, they could be social. So what would be an example of a physical tool? Well, a physical tool could be a pencil and paper, it could be an iPhone, it could be some software such as ChatGPT. So these are physical tools that we use to help us learn. Mental tools are things like strategies that we use to learn, but also language. Language is not just about communication, language is also a tool for learning. Finally, social tools. Social tools could be like collaboration in the classroom. It could be dialogue between peers. It could be dialogue between a teacher and a learner. So if we put this into perspective and we think about our own TESOL classroom, even at this moment of having some rudimentary theory, if we try to apply it to our classroom and think about our teaching, this helps us to think about how learning takes place through tools, activities, and cultural resources, and they develop over time. For some educators, this opens a new way of looking at practice. Are you just delivering knowledge in the classroom, or are you setting up a space and a context in which different tools can be used to get the most out of your learners? So the second key idea is lower and higher mental function. So just to be very brief about this, Vygotsky thought that we had lower mental functions which were similar to what animals had, like a short attention span or a short-term memory, but he also thought we had higher mental functions as well. And the higher mental functions were where we used things like tools within our culture, and through our interactions, we actually reorganized our thoughts. And by this, we create these higher mental functions. So you can see the biological being influenced by the sociological. So the sociocultural coming in to influence the biology. So if we think about this in the classroom, like this distinction can be quite interesting for us because it can help us think that education is not just about, remembering facts and repeating information, which just plays to those lower functions. It's actually also about supporting learners to problem solve, to be analytical, to be able to reason, and to bring all of this, which is part of our higher mental functions, into our communication. Key idea number 3 is about learning and development, and this is really, really important for Vygotsky's theory. So Vygotsky thought that learning can actually be ahead of development. Now, this is different to some other theories of development, especially with children, where we think that children need to be developmentally ready before they can actually take on certain concepts. Vygotsky proposed the opposite of this, where he thought that if learning was well supported, then experience could actually pull development forward. So for educators, this can be a useful thing to think about. Are we waiting for learners to be ready, or are we creating the conditions that might help them to move forward and help them to develop and create new abilities? This might be really different if you're working with children or if you're working with adults. So something for you to reflect on. Okay, so let's think about some implications for TESOL. So you could see this as an invitation to not look at all your learners as individuals who are learning alone, but rather as a community who could learn together through interaction. You might also want to think about tools, resources, activities, and which of these you bring into the classroom. And here I mean, like, don't just bring them in as extras, but bring them in as part of your pedagogy, as part of learning, and see how it shapes learning in the classroom. And also, how can this help us to think about our own teaching? So, do you just come in as the deliverer of knowledge, or are you coming in as the mediator of learning? These two are really, really different things. So, how can you support learners at key moments and help them to reorganize their learning? To wrap up, we have talked about some of the key principles of Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. We talked about learning tools. We also talked about lower and higher mental functions and the differences between this. And then we talked about this key principle that learning can precede development. In the next episode, we'll look at how language can be a tool for thought, and we'll think about how dialogue and private speech can play a part in learning. If you found this helpful, then please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, but more importantly, if you think someone can benefit from what we've discussed today, please share it with them. See you next time.